The Galactic Emergency Council had convened 47 times in its 300-year history. 46 of those times, the crisis had been resolved through the standard mechanisms: diplomacy, military deterrence, resource negotiation, the careful application of whatever combination of pressure and compromise the situation required. The Council was good at this. 300 years of practice had made it very good at this. The 47th time was different. The 47th time, the Council had been in session for 19 days, and the standard mechanisms had been tried and had failed, and the crisis was not resolving. And the Vorrkai fleet of 900 warships was 11 days from the Outer Reach colonies and the Council's combined military response was 630 ships, and everyone in the chamber had done the math, and the math did not work. High Counselor Vethran had been running these sessions for 11 years. She had seen difficult situations. She had seen situations that looked impossible and had found, through patient work and careful maneuvering, that they were not quite as impossible as they appeared. She was not finding that here. 900 ships against 630 was not a math problem that patient work could solve. It was a number. And the number said that 22 billion people in the Outer Reach had 11 days before that number became their reality. She was looking at the tactical display, at 900 red markers moving steadily toward the colonies, when her communications officer interrupted. "High Counselor, we have received a transmission." From Earth, she looked up. "Earth has not been invited to this session." "No," her communications officer said. "They appear to be aware of the situation anyway." A pause. "The transmission is from Admiral Yana Okafor," she says. Another pause. "She says she has been watching the fleet movements for 6 weeks and she thinks she knows something we might have missed." Vethran looked at the tactical display. 900 ships. 11 days. 22 billion people. "Put her through," she said. Admiral Yana Okafor appeared on the chamber's main screen. She was on a ship. The background was a command bridge, crew visible, the quiet activity of a vessel doing something. She was a tall woman in her late 50s, dark hair going gray, with the particular quality of stillness that Vethran had come to associate with military commanders who had spent enough time in genuine danger to stop performing. "Calm and simply be it." "High Counselor Vethran," Okafor said. "Thank you for taking the call." "You said you have information," Vethran said. She did not have time for preamble. "What is it?" "I said I think I know something you might have missed," Okafor said with the mild precision of someone who thought the distinction mattered. 900 Vorrkai warships moving toward the Outer Reach at a consistent speed and heading. She paused. "What is the current Council assessment of why they are moving toward the Outer Reach specifically?" "Resource acquisition," Vethran said. The Outer Reach colonies represent a significant resource base, yes," Okafor said. "That's the standard assessment." "We ran a different analysis," she paused. "The Outer Reach is not the target." The chamber was quiet. "Admiral, I know how that sounds," Okafor said. "Hear me out. 900 warships is a very large force for resource acquisition against colonies with the Outer Reach's defensive capability. You would not need 900 ships. You would need significantly fewer. The force size is inconsistent with the stated objective." She paused. "We've been watching Vorrkai fleet movements for 3 years. Not this fleet specifically. Their general disposition, their logistics patterns, their supply chain movements. 3 years ago, they began a significant restructuring of their deep space supply infrastructure. The restructuring is not oriented toward the Outer Reach. It's oriented toward the core systems." Vethran looked at her. "You're saying the Outer Reach fleet is a diversion. I'm saying the size and configuration is more consistent with a diversion than a primary objective," Okafor said carefully. "The real target, based on the supply infrastructure restructuring, is somewhere in the core systems. The Outer Reach fleet is designed to draw the Council's military response away from the core." She paused, "Which it has." The silence in the chamber had a different quality now. Vethran looked at her tactical display. At 630 ships moving to intercept 900, leaving the core systems with, "Show me the supply infrastructure data," she said. What Okafor shared over the next 40 minutes had been assembled over 3 years. It was not glamorous intelligence. It was not the result of covert operations or daring information extraction. It was the kind of intelligence that came from watching, consistently, for a long time, From tracking the quiet movements of logistics vessels, the gradual repositioning of supply caches, the slow changes in fleet maintenance, patterns that indicated where a military organization was preparing to operate. 3 years of watching had produced a picture that the Council's own intelligence services had not assembled, not because the information was not available, but because the Council's intelligence services had been watching Vorrkai military capability rather than Vorrkai military logistics, and logistics told a different story. Here, Okafor said, highlighting a point on the holographic display that had been shared with the chamber. 18 months ago, the Vorrkai established 3 new supply caches in this region. Not on the route to the outer reach. On the route to Keth Station 7, which is, depending on which analysis you find more persuasive, either the most important commercial hub in the core systems or the second most important. But either way, the target that would produce the most economic disruption if taken. If they take Keth Station 7, Vethran's economic advisor began. 24 to 36 months of significant disruption to core system trade, Okafor said. We modeled it. The numbers are in the packet I sent. She paused. The outer reach fleet is real. The threat to the outer reach is real. If you don't respond, they take the colonies. But responding fully depletes your core system defenses. And then the second fleet. There is a second fleet, Vethran said. We assess with high confidence that there is a second fleet, Okafor said. We have not directly observed it, but the supply infrastructure for it is in place and has been for 8 months. If the second fleet does not currently exist, the Vorrkai have spent 8 months building supply chains for something they decided not to use, which seems unlike them. The chamber was very quiet. Vethran looked at the tactical display for a long moment, at 900 red markers that she had been treating as the entire problem for 19 days. What do you recommend? She asked. Okafor's recommendation was not what Vethran expected. She had expected a military solution, a reconfiguration of forces, a different approach to the outer reach engagement, some tactical adjustment that accounted for the new information. What Okafor recommended was a conversation. Not with the Council, she said. With the Vorrkai. You've attempted negotiation under the assumption that the outer reach is the target, Okafor said. The negotiation failed because you were offering concessions in the wrong location. If the target is Keth Station 7, the outer reach fleet is leverage. It exists to make you desperate enough to offer something regarding the core systems. She paused. What do the Vorrkai actually want in the core systems? What would be worth this level of operation? The chamber was quiet. Vethran looked at her strategic advisor, who looked at the display, who said slowly, Keth Station 7 controls access to 3 major trade corridors. Vorrkai expansion in the northern reach has been limited for 40 years by tariff structures on those corridors. So what they want, Okafor said, is not the station. What they want is the tariffs gone. They want access to the trade corridors on equal terms. She paused. That is a negotiable position. It is very different from 900 warships heading for our colonies. You are suggesting, Vethran said slowly, that this entire military operation is a negotiating tactic. I am suggesting, Okafor said, that the size of the operation is designed to make you desperate enough to offer what they actually want, which is something you probably could have negotiated 40 years ago if anyone had understood what they actually wanted. She paused. 3 years of watching logistics patterns tells you different things than 3 years of watching weapon systems. The Council spent 6 hours debating after Okafor's transmission ended. The debate was not, for once, about military options. It was about whether Okafor's analysis was correct, and if it was correct, what to do with it. And if they tried what she was suggesting and it was wrong, what the consequences would be. Vethran listened to 11 days of debate compress into 6 hours, and at the end of it she made a decision that her career had not required of her before. She opened a direct channel to the Vorrkai fleet, command not through standard diplomatic channels, directly using contact protocols that the Council had established and never used, because establishing them had seemed prudent, and using them had never seemed worth the risk until now. The Vorrkai fleet commander who answered was called Drax. He was older than she had expected. He looked, she thought, like someone who had been doing something difficult for a long time, and was tired of it in the specific way that people became tired of things they could see no end to. "Hi, Counselor," he said. "Fleet Commander Drax," she said. "I would like to discuss the tariff structures on the Northern Reach trade corridors." The pause that followed was the longest 4 seconds of Vethran's career. Then Drax said, "I am listening." The negotiation took 9 days. The Outer Reach fleet held its position throughout, not advancing, not retreating, maintaining the pressure that the Vorrkai had designed it to maintain. The Council's response fleet held its intercept position. 900 ships and 630 sat across from each other for 9 days, while 2 people in a transmission booth worked out something that, Vethran thought afterward, should have been worked out 40 years ago. The terms that emerged were not what anyone had started with. They were not a victory for either side in the way that victories were usually counted. They were functional. They addressed what the Vorrkai actually needed and what the Council could actually offer. And the gap between those two things turned out to be smaller than 11 days and 900 warships had made it appear. On the 10th day, the Vorrkai fleet reversed course. Vethran filed the formal agreement documents that afternoon, and then sat in her office for a long time, thinking about 3 years of logistics data and a conversation that had started because a human admiral had been watching something nobody else had thought to watch. She requested a final call with Okafor. "The agreement has been signed," she said. "The fleet is returning." "I heard," Okafor said. "Good outcome." "I want to ask you something," Vethran said. 3 years of watching Vorrkai logistics patterns, that is a significant investment of resources for intelligence on a situation that was not your conflict. "The Outer Reach is near human territory," Okafor said. "Instability there affects us eventually." "That is a practical justification," Vethran said. "But you shared everything. Without negotiation. Without asking for anything in return. I asked for you to take the call," Okafor said. "You did." Vethran looked at her for a moment. Why? Okafor thought about it. The same quality of honest consideration she brought to everything. Not performing thoughtfulness, but actually thinking. "Because 22 billion people," she said finally. "And because the problem had a solution and we had information relevant to the solution and not sharing it, would have been..." She paused. "It would have been a waste. Of the 3 years and of the solution and of the 22 billion people." She paused again. "We have a thing we say. Information sitting in an archive helping no one is just organized ignorance. Someone shared it with me when I was young and I've never quite shaken it." Vethran looked at her for a long time. "I would like to establish a formal intelligence sharing arrangement," she said, "between the Council and Earth. Your logistics analysis capabilities in exchange for access to Council strategic data that might be useful to your own assessments." Okafor nodded slowly. "I think we can do that. I'll need to run it past some people. But yes, I think we can do that." She paused. "For what it's worth, we have 3 years of data on about 40 other situations in this region that nobody's asked about yet. Some of it's probably not useful. Some of it might be." Vethran thought about 40 other situations. "I would very much like to see that data," she said. "I'll have it sent over," Okafor said. "No charge."